right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the FearCast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD and anxiety spectrum disorders and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed therapist specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders and all those things. And thank you all so much for joining me today for this episode. So this is another episode I'm trying to put on the internet with my face. So it's going to be on YouTube. So if you want to see me and hear me, rather than just hear me, go over to YouTube, or don't. You do you. You be the boss of you. But putting it out there just in case. So I'm going to be really awkward, and I'm not used to this, and I'm trying to be better at it. I'm facing my fears and doing the thing that feels uncomfortable, trying it. So we'll see how it goes. But for those of you who are new to this, and this is a question and answer based podcast. You send me a question about OCD and anxiety, and I'm going to listen to it, consider it, and likely put it up in a future episode, as I am going to do today. So you can go over to FearCastPodcast.com. You can send me a message over there, which is where the questions for today are coming from. You can also send me an audio question, which tends to go to the top of the list and is going to be the first ones that are going to be responded to in the most recent or the most upcoming episode. So you can do that a couple of ways. You can again record your question. You can send it to questions@fearcastpodcast.com. You can give me the shared Google Drive and email that to me. You can put that into the fearcastpodcast.com link, or go over to Instagram. I'm over to Instagram. I am FearCast Podcast over there, and you can send me a direct message, record your audio question there. It's the way most of them get to me these days, but there are options. So that's that. I hope now you are all oriented and know how all of this works. So we are just going to try to do our best. All right, let's hear. So I have two questions I'm going to get to today. One is, they say it's more feedback or more of a comment rather than a question. And the second one is a question that I think is, I think both of them are good. So I wanted to go over them. And you know what? We're just going to get right into it today. So the first question comes from, again, the first comment, I suppose, comes from Donna. Donna says, I appreciate your podcasts that reference scrupulosity. So that's religious scrupulosity. It's moral or faith-based OCD. And Donna, thank you. I really enjoy talking about scrupulosity. I don't get a ton of scrup questions these days, but that's beside the point. So she goes on to say, I have a comment rather than a question. See, there it is. I noticed in your narratives that you often say Christian or Catholic. I want to emphasize that Christians or Catholics are Christians. We believe in an inspired word. We believe in the inspired Word of God, the Bible. We proclaim the doctrine of the Trinity. We recognize Jesus as the Savior and Redeemer. The Catholic faith is, of course, not Protestant, but it is definitely one of the Christian faiths. So I wonder if you could say Christians, such as Protestants or Catholics. Thank you, Donna. It's a great point. Yes. Christians or Catholics? Catholics or Christians? Wait, which one is it? Wait, Catholics are Christians. Yes. So here's the thing. I often say Christian or Catholic because I anticipate that if I were to just say Christians, Catholics are going to get upset that I'm not talking about them too, because it's a very specific version of Christian, right? You can think about it, I suppose, for those who are not in the loop, it's like Christian is a term to find someone who is attempting to follow a religion that focuses on Jesus, all right? I suppose it's the easiest way to describe it. So that's the umbrella. And then underneath, there's all these different denominations, right? There is Catholic, there is Protestant, and there's Catholic, which has its own thing, which is, I guess, more homogenous. But then there's Protestant, and I'm not going to get into the history of it, but then under Protestant, there's all these other ones. There's going to be, Baptist and Presbyterian and evangelical free and, fill in the blank, right? There's a bajillion of them, and they constantly are splitting because Christians can't be bothered to just disagree anyways, or agree to disagree, I suppose it is. Anyways, not the point of this podcast. Point of this is they are under this umbrella, yes. And I'm anticipating that if I were to say Christians, the Catholics are going to get upset. Then if I say Christians referring also to Catholics, then someone over here is going to say, well, they differ enough on doctrine or history or activity or practice that it's slightly different. So we want to differentiate between them. Okay, I guess. And this kind of gets into a long battle between Protestants and Catholics and whatever. And by the way, the Eastern Orthodox Church is just kind of doing their own thing. They're not even in this fight. Anyways, so Donna, I hear you. I'm probably going to still say something to the effect of Christians and Catholics. I can be better at trying to say Protestants or Catholics or Protestants and Catholics. Or I'll just say Christians and then just wait for the hate mail. I can do either one. But point is, Donna, I hear you, and it's a very, very valid point. I'll try to do better. And Donna, if you or other people have more group questions, more specifically religious group questions, let me know. I would love to hear them. I would love to answer them. Love to get some experts on to talk about them too. But you know what? I don't often do that until I get the questions. So send them in. I would love to hear it. All right, let's move on to the next question. So the next question then comes from MJ. This is probably the bulk of what we're going to chat about today. So MJ says, hi, Kevin. I've listened to your podcast for several years. It's not everyone, and that's fine. You don't have to listen to all of them. They say, and I have thoughts and questions concerning harm OCD, which I know you've been asking for. I have. We get a lot of the same kind of questions, which I love and send them in. But other of subtypes, contamination, harm OCD, send them in. I want to hear all about them. It says, here's my deal, they say. They go on to say, I've dealt with OCD since childhood, and harm OCD was probably my first and most difficult obsession. I've had many different therapists through the years and varying levels of improvement. 4 years ago, I worked with a CBT therapist and worked through ERP in regard to many of my fears of harming myself or others. I do not have a history of injuring anyone, including myself, and yet the anxiety can persist. While I'm grateful to continue to live with a strong sense of recovery, these harm thoughts can still send me into a spiral of scary thoughts and feelings of anxiety. The intensity of this anxiety is much, much less since ERP, less since ERP, period. So my question is, can you speak to what my brain is doing to continue to alarm me about harm? And are there any further helpful tips that you have that you could share? My ongoing areas center mostly around being home alone and driving. Thanks for all you do for the OCD community, MJ. All right, MJ, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. And I think it's a great question. First off, I'm so glad that you got connected with a therapist that you like, that you trust, that helped, and that through ERP you were able to make a ton of progress. Awesome. I think it's important to note here that for a lot of folks who have had therapy before, who have struggled, who may not have found much improvement, sometimes it can be the difference of finding a good therapeutic click, like finding a therapist with whom you can work that you get them and they get you, and the communication works really well. This is to that end what's great about this podcast and other podcasts and other writers and other YouTubers is that there's a lot of voices out there. Now, I've said this before, now is the best time in history to have OCD in the sense that there is so much good information that's out there that is free, that is accessible, that is helpful, and that is diverse enough to reach a lot of different types of people that think differently, that act differently, that view the world differently. Because a lot of every therapist is going to come from it in their own slightly different way. They're going to communicate in a slightly different way. They're going to have their own worldview. They're going to have their own way of interacting with other people, the way that they believe or that they view, communication and relationships and all this stuff, and just the way that they view the OCD cycle and how it works for people. Because guess what? It's different for a lot of people, right? People are different, and they're going to view it differently, and they're going to act differently, and they're going to resonate differently with other people. right? My voice in my show might not be for it is not for everybody. I'm just going to tell you that. It's not for everybody. But it's going to be for somebody else. And for someone else's podcast, it's not going to be for them, but the way that I view things and the way that I communicate might resonate with you. So if it's not working for you, keep looking. If you're working with a therapist and it's just not quite clicking, that's okay. They may not be a bad therapist. They just might not be the best click for you. So it can be helpful to find a therapist that resonates a little bit better and go forward with it and give it a try. And I'll say this, there are a lot of other methodologies, right? CBT and ERP, I'm going to harp on that forever. But I know that there are a lot of, and I've had people on to talk about different therapeutic approaches and different modalities, and having that breadth of theoretical approach can be helpful. And I'm going to even reference some of that today. So anyways, I cut it off. Let's see here. So the question is like, what can you do? What can you do about that, right? All right, so I got lost in my own nonsense. All right, so I'm so glad that you've made a lot of progress, but you're still kind of getting stuck in some obsessions. Okay, that's first off, that's totally normal. Some harm thoughts still get you into a spiral, and that you still have fears of being home alone and driving. You also said, can you speak to what my brain is doing to continue to alarm me about harm? And is there any further tips? So I'm not sure exactly if you mean like what's going on biologically that's making that alarm go off. There's a number of brain structures that work together, unfortunately, to help the OCD process move along. I had the thought here that I could look it up. I'm not going to, and I've never been good at memorizing all the names and exactly how they work of the brain structures. That's going to be for somebody else. I will say that one of the parts of our brain that is a main culprit in this is going to be our amygdala, and that's where our fight or flight, it's where the fear comes from. So when that gets activated, it spits out our fear reaction, right? And I've heard it said, and I really like the idea of it, is that the amygdala doesn't really care whether or not it's an imagined fear or whether or not it's a real danger. All of that goes into the amygdala, but the amygdala still, regardless of imagined or real, spits out fear and all that comes with it, right? So when we talk about, or when folks will talk about OCD as being, you say, feels so real. That's because it is real. The feeling of fear is real, but it doesn't mean it's coming from a genuine cause or genuine trigger, right? It can be imagined, it can be theoretical, it can be possible, and it still feels real because the experience of fear is real, right? You've heard me say it before. OCD isn't really a thought problem, it's a feeling problem. How can we tolerate that feeling that everything within us, biologically, evolutionarily, emotionally, metaphysically, everything says this is dangerous? How do we get over that? How do we live our life, and how do we move forward with that feeling that feels so real? It's that we combine our fear and our logical mind. Our logical mind says, this thing ain't dangerous. Or it's very unlikely to be dangerous, or it's very unreasonable to consider the way that I'm responding this as a reasonable way to respond to what feels like danger, but my rational brain says it's not. So we combine these two. We say, okay, I feel the fear, but I'm going to follow my rational mind, and I'm going to do this thing anyways. And that's where ERP really comes in. And we want to continually reinforce to ourselves that those situations that feel very dangerous, that feel scary, that feel uncomfortable, that make us feel uneasy, after we've considered them, we've considered the rationality behind it, we've considered what is contributing to that fear, and that we've said, you know what, it doesn't have any rational basis. I don't have any evidence to suggest that this thing is in fact dangerous, or I am in fact in danger. So I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to do the opposite of what it feels like I ought to do. And that makes me feel uneasy, and that makes me feel unsettled, and that feels wrong. But everybody around me, my therapist, my rational mind, my friends, they're all saying, I don't need to be doing my safety behavior. So maybe I'm willing to take the risk just this one time and see how it goes. And that's super, super scary. But one thing at a time, and that's what we're trying to do with this. One thing at a time. Okay, so one of the things that, all right, so that was more of the biological stuff, and I've just kind of gone on a tangent. But one of the reasons that kind of the fear keeps coming back is that, and you've heard me talk about this before then, is that core fear, right? And that core fear for a lot of folks with OCD is one of the things that we're looking for as what's going to help guide our exposures and guide kind of why, and to help us consider why is this theme so scary for you? Because we can't just automatically assume from the obsessional theme, we can't automatically assume what the core fear is, right? And I'll give you an example from a basic example of, let's say, contamination, right? So someone touches doorknobs, they want to wash their hands a lot, all right? Very basic example. But the core fear, what's driving those behaviors, can be very different from person to person. And from that's going to help guide what exposures we do, right? So it's not just, well, it can be this, but it should be more elaborate than this. Go touch a bunch of doorknobs, don't wash your hands. Okay, that can be great, but it's also what's going on mentally and what is the story that's being played out. Because it can be, well, I don't want to get sick and I don't want to die, so I'm going to wash my hands. Okay, fair enough. It can be, I need to wash my hands because if I have something on my hands, I might get someone else sick and they might die. Therefore, I passed on this contaminant to other, and that's not okay. It's not okay to get other people sick because they could die and then it'd be my fault, right? So notice just even right there, there's a subtle difference in the perspective that we have on why we're doing this. And then the what we're exposing to is the idea of what might happen if we don't do the compulsion. Okay? So this is why it's important to consider the core fear in your exposure work and what you're doing. So MJ, I really want you to start thinking about what is driving this. What are you afraid that might happen? Now, there are a couple different ways that people talk about the core fear. For some, it can be like, what do you fear you'll have to experience or endure forever if you don't do your safety behavior? Some will talk about it as, what are you afraid will be true about you, true about your future, true about the world that you live in if you don't do your safety behaviors, right? If you don't ward off or wash your hands or check or avoid or whatever it is. If you don't do that, what are you afraid of might happen and might be true, okay? And that's gonna help point you in that direction. All right, ICBT has a whole module talking about this called the vulnerable self theme. I'm just gonna read a couple of things about that because I like the way it's framed, or I like the idea behind it, and it can be helpful in thinking about why it is that this theme is grabbing onto you. So the vulnerable self theme, basically, just think about it as like, what is it about me? What is it about this fear that is just matching up? Why are they grabbing onto one another? Okay, so the vulnerable self theme, the fear, it reflects characteristics that we believe we likely have or might be likely to do. Okay, so maybe for you, there's this kind of belief that maybe you're the sort of person who would harm himself, who would harm somebody else. Right? Maybe you are someone and you believe this somewhere within you. You believe that you're someone who could likely hurt other people, or you could be someone who may want to hurt other people or yourself. Right? So there are a lot of different, caveats in this, and as you work with a therapist on this, you gently hone in on that story, and you might, through further conversation, change this several times, but to just get more specific about you and what may be guiding you in your fear. Okay. So the other thing to think about is the vulnerable self theme, our core fear, it doesn't reflect our real selves, nor is it founded in evidence that of who we show ourselves to be in real life. All right. So folks who I work with who have harm-related obsessions, they aren't violent people. All right. They aren't people who generally show themselves to be thoughtless or manipulative or vengeful or angry people, or like I could go on and on. But that story is, oh my gosh, what if I am the sort of person that is the opposite of who I'm trying to be? I'm trying to be a kind and gentle and loving and peaceful and compassionate person. But what if I'm really not? What if I'm the opposite of that? What if I'm a murderous, angry person that's going to kill everyone around me? Ah! All right, that was too much. But that's the story. So the other part about the fear is like it's the fear is this non-existent self that you're afraid of. That's the person you're going to become unless you do your safety behaviors, unless you do your compulsions. All right. So what is it about this? What is the thing that I'm going to become? What is the person that I'm going to become? What is the truth that is going to come out if I don't do my compulsions? Right? So for you, it's I'm going to be this person that harms other people. I'm going to be this person that harms themselves. Right? And you don't want that to happen. So anxiety grabs onto that, highlights that story for you and says, this is something that is deep down, or maybe just under the surface, but this is what's in your future, unless you take these safety behaviors seriously, unless you avoid, check, redrive, make sure you have somebody there, right? Whatever your compulsive behaviors are, you need to make sure that you do those, or else this truth is going to come out. This fact about you will be discovered. The opposite of what you want your life to be is going to happen. Okay? Now, I know I'm talking specifically to MJ in theirs, but for other folks who are listening to this, I want you to think about, like, what is that thing for you? What are you afraid of might be true or unless you don't do your compulsions? What are you worried about might happen about your character, your future, your relationships if you don't do this compulsion? Because that's often going to be what's driving that. And that's going to be what we're talking about then when we're doing our exposures, right? We want to be focusing on that. All right. Now, in the process, then we want to practice then acceptance of the fear as kind of this repeated guest in your life. All right. We want to welcome it, destigmatize it. We want to befriend it. We want to bring that into our life as a possibility, but not a probability. All right. Now, these are two different things, everybody. Possible and probable. There's a lot of things that are possible that just simply aren't probable. All right. It's possible that I could get hit by an asteroid today. That's really not probable. And I'll tell you what, I'm really not that worried about it. So I'm not going to do anything about it. All right. But we know that it could happen, right? I could get, I give this example a lot. I could get into a car accident on my drive home. Okay. It may be more probable than the asteroid or the meteor thing. But you know what? Statistically, it's really unlikely. I drive home all the time and I'm not getting into car accidents all the time. But it could happen. But it's unlikely. But I also need to acknowledge that as a possibility. Now, I want you to think about this crazy thought. In order to overcome our fear, we need to be willing to let that thing happen. We need to be willing for our worst fear to actually come true. It doesn't mean we need to ensure it's going to happen, but we need to say, in order for me to overcome this, I need to pull back all the things that I'm doing that, quote, ensure that this won't happen so that I can overcome it. By pulling back on those safety mechanisms, we're kind of saying it could happen, right? The floodgates are open, right? The goalie is out of the game. The worst fear could happen. We'll see. It's not fun, but we're going to say we'll see. And through repeated exposures, as you have already seen, and for everybody out there, if you start getting into exposures, you'll slowly see over time, does that thing truly happen? Or does something else happen? Meaning, does nothing happen? Most likely it's going to be nothing happens, but we need to show ourselves that, and we need to show ourselves that we can experience the fear, face our fear, and learn that that fear is really unlikely to happen, and that we can endure the discomfort and the uncertainty of it. Okay? All right. So how do we do that, right? One of the things that I want you to do, MJ, is to start thinking about how can you start establishing and trusting the person that you've shown yourself to be over time, right? Over time, people with OCD stop trusting themselves. They outsource confidence and assurance to the absence of anxiety, not to what's likely to be true, what they've seen themselves to do, what their character is. Instead, certainty and confidence comes from the absence of anxiety, which is a bad way to kind of view the world around us, right? Because we can be anxious about a lot of things, but it doesn't mean it's going to elevate the likelihood of that thing happening. Okay, so as you start working through this, we want to start thinking about who is it that I am, MJ. Who are you? Who are you trying to be? And I want you to be more of that while you resist the behaviors that are in service of the fear. Okay, so in that, then we're enacting behaviors that reinforce who you trust and hope yourself to be. Okay? So it's living a values-based lifestyle. But it's also in that saying, I'm going to act as if I am the peaceful, loving, nonviolent person that I believe myself to be. And all of a sudden that voice pops up and goes, but what if you are? It's right under the surface. That could be you. So we're going to say, I see you. But historically speaking, that's not who I've been. Historically speaking, that's not who I've desired to be. It could be true. It could be. But you know what? I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to see what's there. I'm going to see if that does, in fact, happen, right? So what are the ways we do that? You can start by making a list of all the compulsions that you've done, all the compulsions and safety behaviors that you do to ensure that violent thing never happens, okay? So in trusting that you are that person, we're going to move forward in slowly pulling out some of those compulsions and showing yourself, one, you can handle the anxiety and you can live your life without that compulsion. You can do that action without that assurance, without that reassurance, without that checking, without that preparation, without the thing that is ensuring that nothing bad's going to happen. All right? So, for example, all right, so if the fear is being home alone, all right, well, if fear of being home alone, well, but again, you can think about, like, what is it about that you're afraid of, right? What is it you are afraid might happen? And then what are all the things that you do to prevent that thing from happening, right? So it might be, well, if I'm home alone by myself, I might hurt myself. So I need to have other people around to ensure that I'm not going to do it, right? So one of the things you can do with that is be at home alone, not have someone there for extended periods of time. How long do you think that you could stay at home alone without, quote, hurting yourself or without something bad happening? An hour? Try to talk to, your partner, your family, whoever it is, and say, I want to be home alone for an hour and 2 minutes. Okay? Because it's just a little bit over what you think you can do. You're like, I can be home for an hour, but after an hour, oh man, all bets are off. Crazy stuff's going to happen. Great. Hour and 2 minutes. That's 2 minutes over what you thought you could do. And then see what happens. Family comes back, notice that you didn't hurt yourself or you didn't burn the house down, whatever it might be. That's wonderful. That means that you could handle the anxiety and you found that fear didn't come true. So now maybe try to be home alone for an hour and 5 minutes. 10 minutes? You want to push it a little bit more, and over time you're showing yourself, maybe I am who I am. That fear is there. It could happen, but that is unlikely. All right? So maybe it's the fear of, hurting yourself so you avoid knives. Well, cook alone. Have a pocket knife with you, right? Live your life and have a pocket knife with you. A lot of people do it. The fear is, well, maybe I'm going to hurt myself with it. Great, then have it with you. See if it happens. If it does, then we know more about you. But if nothing happens, maybe that feared thought was wrong. right? If the fear is burning the house down, as I previously referred to, I mean, all right, so light candles, cook, use an open range, right? Or have matches in your pocket, have matches and a knife in your pocket, right? Because if you're the sort of person that's going to burn the house down, if that's what the fear is, well, it's going to be a lot easier to burn the house down with matches than it is just like, stick and just kind of doing one of these, trying to get this done. Trust me, I've done that. I've done it. It takes so much work. It's so much work. You take a stick and you just kind of rub it against another stick and you just keep going and you just keep going. And eventually it starts smoking and you light something. It's so much work. You use matches, MJ. It's so much easier. Anyways, if you're going to burn the house down, if you're going to. But you're trusting that you aren't who you fear you're going to be. And you're saying, if that is the person I am, we're going to go discover it. Okay, so you've kind of heard the ideas. So how about the fear of driving? Think about, again, what are the compulsions that you're doing to ensure safety, right? And I want you to do the opposite of that. Trust that you are a good driver. Again, I don't know if you are or are not a good driver, but I presume that you are. I presume you're not just running people over left and right. And if you are, talk to your therapist about that. But assuming that you're not, trust that you are a good and reliable and observant driver. And then you take out those safety behaviors slowly, one by one, and you intentionally go and you drive. You drive alone, okay? You resist redriving, right? Going back just to make sure you didn't run somebody over. You're not going to check Facebook groups, or you're not going to check police reports to make sure that ambulances weren't coming for a hit and run or something to that effect, right? You're going to drive while distracted, okay? You can play sounds of screams. I like doing this one where you can download like sounds of screaming and you put them put them in a playlist, and it's just sound after sound after sound of screams while you drive. And you just keep driving. I like the rule of thumb for this. If you hit someone, if for fear of hit and run OCD, the rule of thumb is you just keep driving and let the police find you. All right. So you're worried about hearing all these sounds. You're just going to keep driving and you're going to let the police find you. They're probably not going to come and get you. Anyways, I've heard of this one. Some people have recommended this for driving. Drive with a bowling ball in your trunk, because we all have bowling balls. Maybe a watermelon is more accessible, but either way, a bowling ball in your trunk says you're driving. It's going to roll back and forth and thunk, thunk, and it's going to create this horrible sound like you've run somebody over. Super effective, super fun for everybody else around you, not you. But the point is that you're driving and tolerating the thought that's inevitably going to come up from hearing that thump. And you just keep going. All right. You can cover your rearview mirror. You can obscure your rearview mirror so you can ensure that, or encourage yourself not to check. Right. So that can be helpful. Lastly, I think I referenced calling a friend. Call a friend. So that might be distracting. Or don't call a friend. And that might be harder for you. Right. But again, all this really depends on what is it that you're afraid of happening? What is that story? What is it that you're afraid of being true if you don't do your safety behaviors? Trust that maybe you are that person that you say that you are, that caring, thoughtful, responsible person, and then go take the risk. Pull back on the safety behaviors and go live the life that you want. That's being open to the possibility that that thing might happen. And if that thing doesn't happen, remind yourself that thing didn't happen. It doesn't mean it's never going to happen. It means that it's unlikely. You know how many people I've run over with my car? 0. One cat, but that was a long time ago. But no people. So keep driving. And I've driven a lot. So we'll see how many more cats or people or dogs or other sort of critters. Oh no, I hit a bird with my motorcycle once. That was super weird. Anyways, this is a long conversation. So MJ, I hope this was helpful. I hope this gives you something to think about, or at least gives you something to complain about to your friends or your therapist. That's also possible. But MJ, I'm going to go encourage you. I say this at the end. Go take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Go out there and take those risks. So thank you so much for your question. Donna, thank you so much for your feedback. And everybody else out there, keep it up. And thanks so much. Thank you for listening to the FearCast. If you would like your question answered on a future episode, please click on the Submit a Question link at FearCastPodcast.com. If you would like your question answered sooner, please send me a recording of your question to questions@FearCastPodcast.com or by sending me an audio message through Instagram by DMing me at FearCastPodcast on Instagram. If you like the FearCast, please write a review on your podcast platform of choice. Please remember that the FearCast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, please go over to FearCastPodcast.com and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously.